Hey guys, today we're talking about our very next unit. So if you would, go ahead and let's make a new unit title, which is going to be Unit 8, Egypt and Rome. So make a new unit title, Unit 8, Egypt and Rome. So you'll write that at the very top of your paper. Or if you're typing, very top of your page that you're typing on. Remember, if you're typing out your notes, make sure to share those with me on Google Drive. If you're writing them by hand, make sure that you take a photo of it and send them to me at the end of the unit or every day, either one. Okay, so we got Unit 8, Egypt and Rome, and in the picture, we have the pyramids for Egypt and we have the Colosseum for Rome. So in this unit, we'll talk about ancient Egypt, and then we'll also get into talking about ancient Rome as well. So that's what we're going to talk about in this unit. We're going to make a section title, and we're going to write down ancient Egypt. So make a section title, ancient Egypt, and then underline it. So write down ancient Egypt and underline it, and put that underneath where it says Unit 8, Egypt and Rome. Okay. So once you got that, first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the Nile River and how the Nile River was quite important for Egypt. So we're going to talk about the Nile River and how important it was. First thing we're going to do, we're going to make a bullet and we're going to write down the word flooding. So make a bullet and write down the word flooding. So as you can see here in the picture in the bottom right hand corner, you can see how you have the Nile River and you see how it's kind of flowing right here. You see kind of pyramid next to it. The Nile River is pretty important for Egyptians. Most of Egypt is a desert. There's desert on both sides of the Nile River, not like directly next to it. You have to go about 50 to 100 miles to either side, and then it starts to become desert. So the area is pretty deserty, but it's kind of like that within 50 miles of the Nile River area. That area is all good for farming. And part of the reason why it's pretty good for farming is because of the flooding in the Nile River. Let's go ahead and make a one and let's write down farmers plan their year round Nile flooding. So, one, farmers plan the year round Nile flooding. So, farmers plan their entire year around the flooding of the Nile River. All right. So, the flooding in Nile River, they plan their entire year around it. And you try to predict how much it's going to flood each year and when it's going to flood. If it doesn't flood enough, that limits the amount of crops you can have. If it floods too much, that's going to kind of ruin your fields and ruin homes. And it's real hard to kind of predict how much it's going to flood each year. But usually you kind of want to fall kind of somewhere in the middle. Not too much and not too little. Go ahead and make it two. And write down cannot predict the amount of flooding each year. So go ahead and make it two and write down cannot predict the amount of flooding each year. So it's real hard to predict the amount of flooding that happens each year. But as I say, you kind of want to be somewhere in the middle. And because of the fact that the Nile River was where it was, it did make invading Egypt pretty difficult because because you need to get food for your army. So you need to travel next to the Nile River. At the same time, it can flood, like we saw with the Crusaders in our last unit. So it makes it quite difficult. You have to stay, where you can get food and not go on the desert parts. At the same time, the river does provide kind of a natural defense because crossing the Nile is pretty difficult. All right, new bullet. We're going to write down Taming the Nile. So, new bullet, Taming the Nile. However, even though it was hard to predict what was going to happen in the Nile River, there were ways of controlling the Nile River. One area, make a one. We're going to write down build canals to carry water from river to dry areas. So, we're going to make a one and write down built canals to carry water from river to dry areas. So, one way in which the Egyptians control the Nile River is by building a whole bunch of canals. Irrigation. We talked about irrigation before and what irrigation was. And that's just kind of building out a canal or a ditch basically and digging it out to your farmland so that water is flowing to your farmland, and you don't have to walk to the river to get water. It's just the water comes to you. So that was one way they kind of controlled the Nile River, that they kind of got water to go out to the areas they needed to go out to. Another way how they use the Nile River, and this wasn't a way of controlling it, but this is just a way of being useful with it, is they used the Nile to travel between cities. So there weren't a lot of roads really in Egypt because there wasn't any point to having a road when you had the Nile River. So they just used the river as a road. And with using this the river as the road, there was no point for them to really make an extensive road system in Egypt. The river was the road. And since most cities were within 50 miles of the Nile River on either side of it, because the desert was further back than that, it didn't make any sense to build up when you had a city that when your cities within 50 miles of the Nile. So yeah, you would just travel down the river to wherever you need to go, and then you would get off on the boat and then walk to wherever you need to go from there. Go ahead and make a three. We're gonna write down Nile made trade profitable. So because you had the Nile River like right there and right next and was right there, and you could transport stuff up and down the Nile River pretty easily with boats, because since boats could float, you could carry quite a large amount of goods on boats and travel it along the Nile River. So that Nile River allows you to float materials on a boat from one place to another place super easily. And it was a lot easier to do than having horses haul that one place to another because they didn't really have roads. So the boats made trade pretty profitable because everyone could just bring their goods to the Nile River, and then they could just move them along that Nile River up and down to where they needed it to go. So Nile made trade profitable. That's number three. Down here in the bottom right, you'll kind of notice these plants down here. That's called papyrus. It's a paper-like material. Go ahead and make a four. And we're going to write down papyrus, and then we'll put down equal sign, and then we'll write down paper-like material. So four, papyrus equal sign paper-like material. So papyrus is right down there in the bottom right-hand corner. You cut that up, and when you cut it up to make paper out of it, you lay it flat horizontally, and then you lay some other parts of it flat vertically. And okay, so you got some like horizontal strips, and then you add some other strips. It would be green as well. So then you got some other strips like this. All right, and then you take a hammer and you smash it. There's my hammer. So then you take a hammer and then you smash it in that pattern, and then you let it sit for a little bit, and there you go. There'd be paper. All right. Next thing, make a new bullet. Write down pyramids. So new bullet and write down the word pyramids. So pyramids were constructed by pharaohs, and they're constructed to be a palace for the afterlife of the pharaoh. So the point of constructing the pyramid was that it would be a place for the pharaoh to rule from in the afterlife. That's why they built the pyramids for. Go ahead and make a one, and we're gonna write down one. Pyramids built as afterlife palaces for pharaohs. So as I was saying, the pyramids are built as these afterlife palaces for pharaohs. And you can see one of the pyramids here in the background. When the pyramids were first built, they were capped with gold. So this very top of the pyramid would have had gold on it, but obviously that's been stolen since then. And the pyramid is made up of several large blocks of stones. We're not too sure exactly how they were constructed, but we do presume that the pyramids were constructed by people that were living in the area, probably about 20,000 or so ish, would help to kind of construct that pyramid. So, those kind of people that lived in the area would construct it as laborers. Now, inside the pyramids, there was usually a lot of use of hieroglyphics. Let's go ahead and make it two. We're going to write down hieroglyphics, write with pictograms for words, sounds. So, two, hieroglyphics equal sign, write with pictographs for words and sounds. So, we do know how to translate hieroglyphics. They actually translate directly into the alphabet. So, they do directly translate over. I'll show you how they directly translate over here in a sec once you guys have that written down for number two. but they do directly translate over to the English alphabet. We figured out how to translate them when we found a stone called the Rosetta Stone that translated the hieroglyphics into Greek. And then since we knew Greek, then therefore we knew what the hieroglyphics were saying. So, how do you translate hieroglyphics? Well, pretty easy how to translate hieroglyphics. I'll show you right here. All right. So, here are each one of the letters in the alphabet. And then we have our little keyboard here. So, if I want to type in Ferrara, for example, Ferrara. There you go. That's how you write Ferrara in hieroglyphics. So, you got Viper, Reed, Mouth, Vulture. All right. So it's pretty easy to do. It has everything just kind of translate directly over. So if I want to type in Jack, for example, so J, oop, okay, didn't want to do snake. Ah, there it goes. J-A-C-K, Jack. All right. So that's how you type in Jack, for example. All right, so pretty simple. Or if I want to type Brooke, B-R-O-O-K-E, there you go. There's Brooke. All right. Or Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y. There you go. There's Bobby. So pretty simple how to kind of type stuff in and such. All right. All right. Next thing. So next thing to do is we're going to talk about the Upper and Lower Egypt. All right. Go ahead and make a new bullet, and we're going to write down Upper and Lower Egypt. So bullet Upper and Lower Egypt. So, like I talked about before, you can see over here in the picture on the right hand side, you can see the Nile River, and then you can see the green areas in green. The areas in green are the places where you can farm at. So, places in green, good for farming. And then you see how the desert is right next to Nile on both sides. And then the pyramids are right over here. So, that's where the pyramids are. Gonna make a one. We're gonna write down Lower Egypt, and then we're gonna make an equal sign. So, one, Lower Egypt equal sign. And then we're going to write down Nile Delta. So 1, Lower Egypt equal sign, Nile Delta. So Lower Egypt is this part right here. I know you would generally think of Lower Egypt being on the south, but Egyptians didn't think of the world in terms of north and south. They thought about it in the way the river flowed. So as the river flows this way, anything that flows down the river is lower. So everything that flows down river is lower. And then if you have to go up river, that's upper. So everything down river is lower. And if you had to go up the river, it's upper. So since this is the lowest part of the Egyptian territory that flows in the Mediterranean Sea, that's Lower Egypt. Then make a 2 and write down Upper Egypt. And then we'll write down upstream. So 2, Upper Egypt equal sign upstream. So Upper Egypt is upstream, Lower Egypt downstream. So once again, 2, Upper Egypt equal sign upstream. Okay. And like we also talked about as well, there's a desert, so make it 3. 3 deserts on both sides of the Nile. So desert over here, desert over there. So write down for 3. 3 deserts on both sides of the Nile. All right, and that's where we're going to stop at for today.